And that is Mustafa Navestezen, and now the session is being recorded. So, welcome again to the Saturday tutorial. I'm not Saturday tutorial, the bootcamp for Informatics 1B. And today we'll be covering like a couple of the concepts regarding object-oriented programming. So, we're looking at inheritance, we're looking at upcasting, downcasting. We're going to cover polymorphism a little bit more. And we're going to do practical 9 essentially from scratch. I did do a design before this so that I'm not completely like lost or whatever the case might be. When I get well, I'll understand what mistakes I make during the code, if I make any. So, is there any questions regarding practical 9, polymorphism, upcasting, downcasting, inheritance, anything that you guys want to ask? Even UML, I don't mind. No. All right then. That's cool. So just so before you guys go on, I just wanted to let you guys know that like this is this stuff is really important to you going forward. Like you will be using this work throughout your academic career. And I did a job interview a couple weeks ago, and they asked me abstract classes and polymorphism in the job interview. So as you can imagine, the stuff will really help you in future. You'll be able to be a better coder. You'll be a better software engineer, and you will actually be able to do more stuff quicker. So you'll be and better essentially. So you'll see why. And there's goals behind object-oriented design and why it is the way it is and why we do things the way we do things, right? And that's why concepts like polymorphism and inheritance and stuff came out. So it might seem a bit complicated now, but hopefully if you guys watch the lectures again and you and throughout this video you ask any questions, you can get some like insights um, and probably understand it a bit better. All right, so seeing as there's no questions and I've rambled on for a full 3 minutes, I'm going to start. Oh, okay. Files, sir. How and where do we use the keyword serializable and why? And why we downcast an object of a file. All right, so in this specific practical, I am not really going to be covering files, but if we have a bit of time at the end, I'll try and answer this question. It's a very good question though, so I'll definitely try and come back to that. Any other questions? I'm looking for more like the stuff regarding like practical 9 for now, because you need to understand that properly before you move on to files. Also, as far as I was told, very little files has been done in your class. So that's kind of why I'm not trying to go too much into that for now. Yeah, so I'm only allowed to be like in the scope that you guys have been shown already. So I'm not allowed to go ahead of that or anything like that. So I'm gonna try and stay away from files because it's easy for me to kind of go overboard there. So, but if you do have like if at the end we have some time, I'm more than happy to try and look at it and help you understand what's going on. All right. Okay, cool. So let's get into let's actually get into some coding and stuff. All right, so I'm just gonna quickly show you this, right? Hopefully you guys can see the Google Chrome tab that I've got going. All right, so the first thing is this is a relationship, right? So that's when you know like there's the two main concepts that you guys are kind of dealing with is composition and inheritance, right? So composition is a relationship. Like an animal is a type of wildlife, a rhino is a type of wildlife, right? That's how you know it's inheritance. It's not has a. So you can't say a lion has a wildlife. That doesn't make sense, right? Like logically speaking. And that's one of the goals of object-oriented programming is to make sure that when you code stuff and when you design stuff, it's easy and intuitive to understand, right? So just to reiterate, like the principles or the goals of object-oriented design, it should be easy to fix, it should be easy to upgrade, and it should be easy to understand, right? So those are the three main ones that you kind of looking at. And I'm sure there's stuff on your theory paper, like that you might have to learn a bit more. But in a practical sense, that's kind of the gist of what you're looking for when you're trying to do an object-oriented design, right? So obviously this stuff comes directly off of the question paper. So I've got the question paper here, and we know that these are the attributes that belong to the wildlife class. So we've got tracker ID, rarity, level, sightings, months, and least month, right? Feel free to stop me at any point and just like pick up your hand or whatever the case might be if you feel like I'm not explaining something properly. All right, so those are the variables that come directly off of the question paper, as well as the same with their types. So everything comes off directly there. I did do a bit of weird notation with the array just to make it look a little bit more like VB. In your semester test, please use the notation that the lecturers have prescribed. So if this is square brackets, then please use square brackets. If this is round brackets, then please use round brackets. If it's brackets on that side, please do that. Right? Make sure you follow the actual lecture. This is more like this bootcamp is kind of more to give you what the tools you need to either just either pass or to move up a bracket in your marks, hopefully. I will try and do it to the best of my ability, but I don't remember everything from first year. So you're welcome to correct me if you feel like if I'm saying something that contradicts. So in the QP, they had put an array on the data type. All right, cool. On the question paper, they put an array on the data type. All right, that's fine. If that's the way that it's supposed to be done, then you should be doing that, right? Just make sure you're following the rules of the lecturers and the lectures essentially. So now we get to the constructor, right? So over here, it'll tell you that a constructor that accepts the parameters, right? So just a quick thing, parameters are when you specify the stuff that gets sent to a function. Arguments are when you're actually sending values to a function, right? So I put arguments into a parameter list, but the parameter list specifies what a function can accept or method can accept, okay? So that's just a little bit of terminology that might help you out and when you're understanding the question paper, right? So obviously it takes tracker ID, which is a string. We got rarity level, we've got months. So those two are integers. So, okay, yeah, so it's sightings, square, and then because it's a dynamic array, we've got the double dot star or triple dot star, right? So that's also a way that you can do it, and it just depends on the way that the lecturer wants. So there's different ways of denoting arrays. But thanks for that. Should we add parameters, the ones that we think should be there? Actually, when it comes to your test itself, right? No, you should not touch what the test specifies. If the test specifies do this, only do that and nothing more, right? Your job is to look at instructions, take them and apply them. So actually execute your instructions as perfectly as possible. Don't try and be fancy or whatever, because what can happen is you can end up losing marks because later on you might not be achieving one of the concepts that's necessary. For example, you can do some stuff with if statements that's not supposed to be the way it is, right? So one of the, like here, it says that this needs to be done with a select case and 3 if statements, right? So this tells you that we're looking for specific things in your code in the semester test. Even if you look at the mark sheet, right? There's specific stuff that we look for in your code. That's why the marks are allocated the way they are. So when you do it, try and follow these instructions to the T as perfectly as you possibly can. All right, and if there's something that doesn't follow these instructions, put a detailed comment explaining exactly why you haven't followed the instructions in that specific area. Because in your semester test specifically, there's a very high chance that you're not gonna be there to explain, right? I mean, obviously they're going to be marking it when you're not there because of the sheer amount of people writing the semester test and the size. So that's a thing you have to keep in mind, right? You won't be there to explain your code. So your code has to be readable, it has to be understandable, and it has to work well. And your naming, like, so for in terms of readability, I'm talking your naming convention of variables. I don't want stuff like C and stuff like that. Make sure it's a good word, not too long. Obviously, don't put a whole sentence down. But if you're making an integer to hold the choice of animal type, for example, put choice down, right? Or put a comment saying this is to hold the choice. So make sure that your marker can easily find and understand your code, because in the event that you do something slightly wrong, it's easier for us to give you more marks if you explain yourself and your thought process, right? Because we know where you fell off the track, and so it's easy for us to find out where to give you marks. Because um, I know you guys haven't really noticed yet, but the academy really isn't there to take away marks from you. So the people who are marking your semester tests, like I think I'm going to be marking your semester tests, as well as Mr. van der Westhuizen and Dr. Cottrell. These guys, we're not there to try and like take away your marks. We want to give you as many marks as possible. So if we can see that you kind of know what you're doing and you made a small mistake, we'll more than likely try and give you the most marks that we can, right? It's dependent on how well we can understand your code, because obviously wrong code is more difficult to understand than right code. So the more easy to read it is, the better it is for us to mark and give you marks, right? So that's just something to keep in mind as you're getting ready for the semester test. So then we've got calculate average, which literally goes through an array and calculates the average. You guys have done this, I don't know, close to like 7 times from the previous semester now. Then we've got lowest sightings, finding a minimum, also something you've done many, many times. You should be able to do this relatively easily, right? If you're struggling with arrays and stuff like that, then you really need to revisit your informatics 1A stuff. You want to book a consultation, you want to go sit in a virtual assistance lab, and you want to actually get somebody to try and to explain these things to you at least a week before your semester test. You need to get this down, right? So then we've got calculate rarity. Now calculate rarity is a bit of a special function, right? So calculate rarity is actually something that can change in the derived classes. So this is obviously, we know this is overridable. We know it's dependent on a couple things, right? So it's dependent on the average sightings as well as the rarity level that's sent in the constructor, right? So, and also they specifically mentioned that it's one select case and 3 if statements, right? So clearly, if it's 3 if statements can switch between 2 options, right? So you want to go, well, the if statements are going to decide between the average, whether it's above or equal to 15, or below or equal to 15 or above that, right? So it's going to switch between these 2 columns, and while the select case will probably take the three options and switch between the rows, right? So that's just something you can pick off straight off the bat as soon as you read the question paper. Then we've got a display function which reads off the stuff in this format and puts it into a string and gives it and returns that, so that you can actually display that on your multi-line text box that's coming later in the practical. And then we've got, so now question B is about actual inheritance, right? And we have a derived class lion and rhino. Lion has pride as well as his alpha. Pride being an integer that basically holds the number of lions, and is alpha holding a boolean value that indicates whether the lion is the alpha male or not, right? If we were making this much more realistic, obviously there'd only be one alpha male. But as far as I've read in the practical, they don't ask you to validate that in any way, so you don't have to stress about that. Then we've got a constructor, also this basically the same constructor. So that makes it very easy for us. We know we can easily just call mybase.new for that one. That'll work nicely. And then we've got calculate rarity rating, right? This always returns C, right? So we override calculate rarity rating from above. Remember that for above, it can be any one of these depending on the average sightings and the rarity. So this one depends on actual user input, right? Well, this one just goes, if it is a lion, it returns C, right? So that's a pretty easy one to kind of see, changing whether a polymorphism is on or off. Excuse my pronunciation there. All right, then we've got display here, right? So similar to this, but at the end we've got whether the lion is an alpha male as well as the lion's pride. Again, a cool way to use my base, right? So that's something we can see there to reduce code. And rhinos have a crash, also just an integer that houses like the number of rhinos in a herd or a family, or in a crash. Actually, that's the correct word. I didn't know that until I saw this practical. So if you didn't know that, you're not alone. But yeah, so then there's a constructor. This constructor is slightly different though, right? So this one takes, instead of months at the end, it takes a number in crash, and it does the necessary initializations. And this is because rhinos are always monitored for 2 months, right? That's some really important info there. You can't be missing that out. All right, so now obviously calculate rarity rating returns A for rhinos, the same way this one always returns C if it's a lion. Then we've got a display which kind of just appends the rhino's crash to the end of that string. All right, so then question C, D, F, and G must be answered in separate methods, right? The easiest way to do these in separate methods is to have a button for each one. All right, so that immediately can tell you, look, I need to have a button for question C, I need to have a button for question D, I need to have a button for question F, and a button for question G. I don't know where E happened to go here, but funny story, that was a typo. But yeah, so question C over here, right? So this is using a single array, instantiate objects to store information of the different lions and rhinos. Right, so single array, that means upcasting. We're gonna make an array of the base class, and we're gonna make objects of the child of each child class or each derived class, and then we're gonna cast it to the base class. All right, then we've got the number of the different kinds of wildlife or wildlife animals, and then we store the types and the values, etc., etc., etc. We can assume that all lions are monitored for the same period of time. In the event that you see that this is not there, you should definitely be asking on Discord or via email or something whether you can assume this, because this will really complicate your life if it's not there, right? Well, it's not that much of a big difference once you understand the process behind it, but it can become a little bit iffy for people who aren't used to that kind of thing, right? So then we use the single array that we did in question C to display all of this stuff, right? So obviously you can't do question D without doing question C first. Then without removing any code, the Director General of National Parks Management would like your program to calculate the rarity rating using the table above, right? So essentially they give you a hint here, right? That's really cool because it tells you immediately what you need to do. You're turning off polymorphism, right? You're making sure that this doesn't happen, that this A doesn't happen. So that's a really, it's actually one of the most difficult questions if you don't understand what's going on here. So I'm going to go a bit into detail with this one. But if you look at the mark sheet, right, it's only 3 marks. Let's just see, it's C, D, E, right? So it's 1, and then with the code change, right? So it's 4 marks in total. So you're really not gonna stress too much about this question here, right? Then F is using downcasting, determine and display the number of rhino objects in the array, and then determine the total number of rhinos in the park. This will be the sum of the rhinos in the crash, right? So essentially we're gonna count the number of rhinos, make an array of rhinos, and using that array of rhinos, we're gonna count the actual rhinos in the crash, right? So in each crash, and then sum it together to get the total number of rhinos in the park. All right, any questions with regards to the actual question paper or the actual practical sheets? Anything that you guys are wondering about, not sure about, or anything like that? So what's the difference on how the program will execute between what I wrote and this is Shongware, right? Not quite sure. Oh, right. So essentially UML it stands for Unified Modeling Language, right? So it's a little bit iffy because there's not exactly a single guideline for it. There's different conventions, like you'll get things like crow's foot and stuff like that, right? So the one you're using right now is kind of a mix, and you'll learn a proper version either next year or in the following year when you go to third year, right? So that's why I'm not kind of focusing too much on it. But essentially, what the one says, it says that there is that the array, like the block size, is allocated via integer when it's followed by the integer, or that it's a number of copies of the variable, right? So that's kind of what it says. It's essentially the same thing, but that slight difference in meaning, if you want to kind of pull it out like that, you can. It's not really going to change the way that the program will execute in any way. It's just kind of a slight difference in what you're saying, right? So essentially the one that Emmy's, okay, well, I'm not going to try and pronounce the surname, but essentially, so if you go sightings colon integer and then the square brackets, right? What you're saying is sightings is the name given to the address that points to a block of integers, right? So those people who are doing comp sci will kind of understand that. While if you go sightings square bracket integer, you're going sightings is a block of integers, right? So it's not really a different kind of thing, but it's just a slight difference in like what you're saying, and it's often more intuitive for people to, like, for coders to see the citing square brackets and integer. All right, so does that kind of answer your question? Is composition part of the practical? I don't know. I haven't seen the question paper. It's top secret. We're not allowed to see that. If I saw that, I'd have to die, and I don't want to die, so I didn't want to sneak a look at that. But essentially, I will be covering the second session. I'll be doing a past paper from 2013, way back when we were still young children, and that'll have some composition in it, just to prepare you in all fronts. If there's anything specific that you want me to cover also in the second session, like, I don't know, interfaces or whatever the case might be, I can try and do something with that. But as far as I know, I'm going to cover the main stuff today. So it's just going to be inheritance, then polymorphism, upcasting, downcasting, turning off polymorphism. That's all today. Then tomorrow, this afternoon, we're going to do composition and iterating. Yeah, so that's essentially what we're going to do today. Again, and then we'll probably have a bit of Q&A at the end of the second session, if we have enough time. All right, so any further questions regarding like this? Okay, so while you guys are typing up your questions, I'm just gonna kind of continue with this, right? So as mentioned, we've got the constructor, we've got the methods calc_av, which returns a double because there's some division happening. We've got lowest citing, which will return an integer. Right, lowest citing, it's specified here, right? So lowest citing returns the actual number of sightings in the lowest month, right? But it stores the month with the lowest sightings in least month. So that's just something that you guys have to keep in mind when doing this practical or redoing the practical. I do definitely recommend redoing this practical. It's a really good practical to make sure that you understand polymorphism. What else do we have? All right, so we've got calculate rarity rating. I have it returning a char. If you have it returning a string, that's more than okay. I think that's actually the way the memo has it, so don't stress too much about that. I just prefer keeping things as small as possible. We've got display, which returns a string. Then we've got our property methods. It specifically states in the question paper somewhere here, only sightings has a property method, right? So only sightings has a property method, and that's reflected in my UML. Then we've got a utility method called validate rarity, which takes in an integer and splits out an integer, right? There's multiple ways you can do this utility method. You can actually have a subroutine which takes a by_ref integer, and then it just sets that integer to 1 if there's nothing that's valid, right? So you're welcome to do that. Also, I don't think there's a specific way in which they wanted you to do the validator. If we look at the mark sheet, I think there is marks for a helper function though. So wildlife class, we got display, calculate, construct, utility method for validation. There we go. That's how you know you're supposed to do a utility method. It's in the mark sheet, right? Remember to read your whole paper and your mark sheets. Highlight the really nitty-gritty details when you're going through your practical paper. Otherwise, you will probably miss something, right? And then after you've done your design, come back and make sure that your design matches all of the criteria that's on the paper. And then once you start coding for each question that you code, come back and make sure, right? Don't lose easy marks because you didn't want to read or you're feeling pressured or whatever the case might be, all right? Make sure to read properly, make sure you highlight the things that are important and make sure when you code your answer, it actually matches what was asked, right? Okay, cool. Then we got the lion class, which has, ooh, that's far, which has pride in his alpha. You guys can see this, right? Like it's not too small. Yeah, please, can somebody raise a hand if they can read this quite easily? Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Oh, somebody says it's a bit small. All right, I'll zoom in a bit. Oh, that's too much. Okay, cool. So here's lion, right? I'm hoping that's a bit better. Here we've got, so rarity level, same constructor. The reason I put this in here, right, even though it is, because it's technically not inherited. All right, cool. So then we've got the two methods that are overridden, right? We got calculate rarity rating and a display. Then we've got the two property methods, one for pride and one for is alpha, right? And on this side, we've got a Rhino, which has one whole attribute called crash. Got a constructor that's different, right? But not really. And then we got calculate rarity rating, which is a character. And obviously, these are the two overridden methods again, overridden, whatever. And then we've got the crash property method, right? So again, with the property methods, I'm not 100% sure on what your UML convention is that you guys are following in the class. I am doing this just so you guys know that there's supposed to be a property method in the UML. Why is it char? Well, if we look at the question paper, right, it only says you return one letter. And a char means a single character in a string, right? So that's why I chose char, because I don't feel like returning a string. If you did return a string, that's more than okay, right? Your marker shouldn't be taking off marks for that because essentially you're not doing anything wrong. Okay, so that covers our design a bit. Just a couple questions, right? To be abstract or not to be abstract? Double quotes on the letter. All right. Double quotes could, that does mean string literal, actually. So yes, if you put a comment there and you said that you were using string because it had double quotes, you're more than happy. It's more than fine if you did that, right? I just designed it as char because I felt like it's a waste of space to have a whole bunch of other characters that are not going to be used. All right, so okay, cool. As long as you got that. Is that a question? I see a hand raised. You're welcome to just unmute your mic and speak to me if you want. I guess not. Oh, okay, no, it's cool. Is 3 hours enough? Is 3 enough to write the practice? Yes, it definitely is. And I'm going to show you now that I'm going to try and do as much as I can in 2 hours of this. And obviously that's not including files, but the fact that I'm talking you through everything means that like my work speed is like kind of halved. So you should be able to cover this pretty easily, especially if you practice. Like if you're struggling to finish one of these practicals in 3 hours, that's an indication that you need practice, right? It means either your typing speed is a bit slower or your understanding of things is a bit rusty and needs a bit of sharpening up or whatever the case might be. But essentially, you are 100% should be able to finish at least this practical in like 2.5 hours, maybe 2 hours, 45 minutes, 3 hours at the latest for this practical, yeah, right? Working at top speed under pressure, right? Obviously now I'm explaining things and answering questions along the way, so it's gonna take it might take a bit longer depending on how many questions get asked and how in depth I go, right? But yeah, back to this question, right? To be abstract or not to be abstract. Okay, so obviously they told us already that we're not gonna be instantiating a wildlife class. Like there's no such thing as a wildlife, right? There's no animal called a wildlife. So that means that if we don't instantiate this, right, it could be an abstract class. Does anybody want to venture why this shouldn't be an abstract class? Does anybody want to give me an idea about why it shouldn't be an abstract class? I'll give you a minute. It's 10:32. Nope. All right then. Let me explain, right? So essentially, the definition of an abstract class is that there must be at least one abstract function, right? Now, an abstract function differs from a virtual function in VB, right? Different methods with different functionality. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, but I think you're talking about the overriding stuff, right? So yes, we are overriding things, but the reason this is not going to be abstract is because we have no abstract functions, right? Every single function here has some implementation, right? So and for a class to be an abstract class, it needs to have a must inherit function or an abstract function. All right, so that's I spoke about those two things. Cool. Last round, any further questions regarding this? An abstract class is the minute you have a abstract function, right? An abstract function is a function that's basically only their name. And because it's only their name, you can't make an instance of it, right? You can't make an instance of that class. And because you can't make an instance of that class, it has to be called abstract. So this becomes a must inherit class when there is a must override function. And if there's overridable, this doesn't have to be must override. I mean must inherit, right? So that's the key to whether something should be an abstract class or not. Unless of course your question paper definitely says that it has to be abstract, right? So now that that's out the way, let's get to coding, right? So I've got a blank Visual Studio instance up and running here. I'm gonna quickly add some classes quickly. Remember to make sure the names of your classes are the same as in the question paper, right? Make sure that spelling is exactly the same and it's easy to find, right? Because if you have dodgy names and stuff, we don't know where to look for marks. It becomes a bit of a problem because now we have to go and inspect your code instead of just giving you marks for like question P or whatever the case might be, right? So the other one we had was lion. And the final one we had was rhino. All right, so one of the key things, right? So you guys have to always have your details, right? If you don't have your details, you will have a serious problem. Okay, so I'm just gonna copy and paste my details quickly because I don't want to waste your time typing that. It takes long. Remember to have the paper, the form, the test that you're writing, the date, your surname, and your student number. Most importantly, your student number, right? That's super important for this. Right, then I'm just also going to do something you should know already. It's called option statements, right? So option strict, it ensures all conversions must be explicitly stated and no narrow cost, right? The reason these comments are here is so you guys can remember something that's really important, right? Will this session be available later? I don't know what you mean by that. This will be recorded and you will have access to the YouTube video thing, I'm sure. But so I know the copy paste kind of seems scary right now. I'm not going to do it when I'm actually coding. It's just for the stuff you should know, right? I'm just to save us all time. I'm just putting that down because it's like the details. It's on your. It's as instructions on your question paper, and these are you've been doing since day like 3 in informatics 1, right? So the reason I put those comments there is to remind you, right, that you might not have, because you might get an error that says option strict disallows narrow costs, right? That means that you're casting from a double to an integer and some data is being lost in this conversion. All right, so then you can understand your error and you can fix it. The same with explicit, right? So all variables must be explicitly declared. If you get an error code that mentions option explicit, you know immediately that you forgot to declare your control variable or whatever the case might be, right? As for option infer, this disables type inference, right? So that means you can't let the compiler choose types for things. So if you get an option infer kind of error, then you know that this is the problem and you'll know how to sort it out like that. That's the reason I put this back here, and that's the reason I wanted to just remind you of that information, right? Because right now it doesn't seem super important, right? But actually it really, really, really is important. All right, let me just sort out this. All right, cool, that's there. And this is here. All right. So now let's go to, obviously we're going to copy paste this to every single class. The one I'm going to start coding with is wildlife, right? Because, what have I done? I think I've copied nonsense or blank space. Let's do that again. All right, cool. So now we got that. I'm going to start with this because I have a design for it, right? So, and the design kind of told me that the most stuff is happening in wildlife class, other than the form, obviously. So one of the things I like doing, right, is I like making little sections in my code to make it a bit easier for people to find things, right? So I go attributes, right? Variables. And I make it go like all the way across the screen, so it's easy to find the different sections of my classes. Okay, so what we're going to have is we're going to have attributes. We're going to have a section for constructor. We're going to have a section for methods as well as for utility methods, right? This makes it just makes it so much easier for like a marker or whatever the case might be to actually find your code and to give you marks, right? Because that's what you want. You want your marker giving you marks. That's what we're here for. The easier they can find things, the better for you and everybody else, right? So I know it does seem like a little bit of a waste of time right now, but it's actually very, very good. So Then we're gonna have a constructor. And then we'll have one for utility methods, right? If you have any questions that have sprung up in your mind from the other stuff that we've been doing, please let me know. Right, so under attributes, right, we're gonna have to have the stuff from our design, and that stuff is essentially gonna be tracker ID, rarity level, sightings, months, and least months, right? So all of these are gonna be private for now, until we so find that they shouldn't be private. So if you're judging my typing speed, please, I haven't had any sleep. Honors is pretty rough right now. And I'm generally a very slow typer, actually. So don't fall asleep while I'm typing. If you have any questions or any comments or even any programming jokes, I'm more than happy to hear those, right? Does anybody know why we're putting these underscores just before everything? It'll be important for session 2. So if you guys know it now, I don't have to stress about it later on. To avoid overshadowing, yes, that is 110% correct, right? So overshadowing is when you have two variables that are named the same and that are alive in the same scope, and your compiler doesn't know which one you're talking about, right? So you're just confusing Visual Basic if you do that. So we keep the names separate to avoid that. But in the next practical, you won't, they have to be named the same. So we're going to see how we overcome that. Right, so that's pretty cool. Also, the next question is, right, so we have these option statements, and the reason why we have them is so that anybody who's reading our code knows the rules we're following, right? And the reason we want rules when we're coding is so that our code is readable, it's easy to understand, and it's easy to fix, right? And we can find errors quickly. So that's why the by-val versus by-ref argument is really important. For example, right, in methods, actually let's do constructor first. What we're gonna have is new by-val ID string. We want rarity level and months, right? So it's by-val. I was wondering when it said that only sightings must have a property method. Doesn't that mean the other ones must be protected, maybe? That's an interesting question, right? That's a very, very interesting question. The other variables must be protected, obviously, right? So the ones that we get from our actual constructor is months, tracker ID, and rarity level, right? So sightings is done via property method. That leaves least month, which is calculated via a public function known as calculate least month, I think. Yeah, lowest sightings, right? So why is sightings not private? Sightings as integer thing. You can have this to denote an array, or you can have this to denote an array. Both are the same. So it's just up to you. Right? I found that they both work exactly the same. In case you're wondering. Variable as integer. Does the constructor accept the variable names with underscores? Why would you do that? The reason we put the underscores in there was to avoid overshadowing, right? So it makes no sense that you would now make overshadowing. In the question paper, all right, let's go look at the question paper quickly and see if that's the case. Oh yes, so you do have to do these here. All right, okay, we'll deal with that right now then. All right, so what we're gonna have is track ID, priority level, and by now months, wasn't it? I'm gonna go me dots. Track ID is equal to track ID. Now what does me do, right? So me refers to this specific class instance in memory, right? So when you call the constructor creates a memory location, right? And all of the stuff that goes into that memory location is what will be referred to when you call me. So if you call the constructor again, you make a different memory location, and me will give you a different value. All right? Does that make sense? I'm hoping that makes sense. So please can you re-explain? All right, let me just finish this. You don't get it. All right, cool. I'll deal with that now. All right, so just for the sake of this, right, I'm gonna quickly stop sharing and I'm gonna go into a whiteboard. All right, so that you guys can. Oh wait, I'm just gonna actually open Paint here. That's easier. All right, so let's say we have something called months, right? No, actually, let's call it animal, right? Animal, and it's actually a wildlife instance, right? For some obscure reason, it is a wildlife instance. Right, so we'll make this a little square, right? So we declare an animal and we call the constructor, right? So it builds this here, right? And inside here, we've got different values. So we got one for track ID, we got one for months, we got one, okay, that was terrible. We got one for like rarity level, etc., 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 right? And what happens is, right, when you go dot me inside here, right, what you're saying is go directly to this thing here and use the variables and attributes from this. Right, so it talks about an instance, right? While not the class related one, right? So obviously this diagram doesn't. Okay, wait. Let's retry explaining that. Right. So when we declare this, right, it makes some pointer in memory, right? So there's going to be some pointer that we got that's how we access this memory, right? This pointer obviously points to this instance. Okay, when we talk about this pointer.me, we're specifically referring to the properties or the attributes of this block that has been allocated in memory. The one without the me is the stuff that anything else. So that's kind of differentiating between what's in the parameter and what's part of the actual attributes of the class. Does that kind of make a bit more sense now? Please raise your hand if you still don't understand this concept. Nobody raised their hand. Okay, so we've got one person who kind of doesn't understand stuff. All right, that's not a problem. One more time. All right. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna go a little bit more in depth this time, right? So when we declare, so let's say we say private animal as wildlife, right? Animal in this sense here, right? This word animal, that is actually a pointer, right? So I'm gonna make a star a pointer because people in C++ will know that, right? So what is a pointer? A pointer is, it's essentially like your home address, right? You're making an address to some allocated memory, right? Now when you talk about some allocated memory, in memory, you need to create a space. Inside the space, we can have things like tracker ID, right? And we can have things like rarity level, right? So these things here, these, I don't know how to highlight here, but essentially, I'm just going to do a underline. Essentially, these things here, right? These are attributes of this specific memory block, right? And what happens is this pointer that you call animal, right? That actually points to that thing, right? So when you say animal, so when you say .me inside here, right? When you say that inside there, what you're talking about is you are talking specifically about these little things in here, right? You're talking about the attributes of the class, right? Does that kind of make sense? So this is .me references those things. Now you could have a function in here, right, called my private, let's go public sub method, right? Oh no, that's a keyword. Let's go my public sub math, right? And in here we have tracker ID, right? Because of this, right? This tracker ID is not .me. So that way when we say me dot tracker ID or .me, we can say this is specifically those ones, while this one is not. For accessing instance variables is a weird word to use there. Yes, it's actually referencing itself. It's referencing itself because you can make many different blocks of wildlife, right? So they can be like 100 of these in the background, right? So there can be lots and lots of these. But animal is the one that we named here, and animals me is this instance, is these attributes. Yes, it's actually those attributes, while this is not those, right? Does that make sense? Does that kind of make sense? I'm hoping so. If you still don't understand, please raise your hand. Did I win? Yes, I won. Everybody understood that, or at least everybody thinks they understand, which is great. It means if you watch the video again, you'll fully understand. Ooh, okay, so my class versus me, right? So that's an interesting discussion. We'll have that when we're doing question E, all right? So when we're doing question E, we'll talk about the difference between my class and me. But for now, I'm hoping you all understand me, and I'm talking about an instance, right? My class doesn't talk about an instance. It talks about the actual stuff in wildlife. It's me.attribute, but I just call this the .me operator because it makes sense to me. Does that kind of help you? So yes, essentially it should be me dot, but I'll show you that now. Okay, cool. So that's my little drawing. I hope you like my art style. It is A class, right? You can call me the next Da Vinci. All right, so we're back here, and that's the me dot thing that I was talking about. So this one here talks specifically about that, and you'll see now, right? When I double click on that, it highlights that one. But when I double click on that one, it highlights that one. So the compiler knows the difference. You see that? That one's the rarity, and this one here is that one. Even though they have the exact same name, the compiler immediately knows the difference thanks to me dot. Okay, cool. So I'm hoping that kind of helped you guys out there a little bit. Where did it go? Wait, move this to the wrong screen. My bad. All right, now back to the stuff, right? So now we've got the constructor, and the constructor is nearly done, right? But one of the things we didn't hear about is where does this get redeemed, right? Nobody told us where to redeem the array. Nobody told us but what we do know now is we know the number of months. Okay, so why don't we just do it now, right? So okay, so we're gonna redeem the array, and it's gonna be citing, and we're gonna redeem it to months. Now, obviously, this one you can kind of do the me dot, but both of them are the same, so we no longer have to care about that essentially, which is really cool, right? So now we redeemed the sightings, right? But it's just good practice for you to initialize every value there because you don't know when it's going to be initialized otherwise, right? So each value 4x equals to 1, 2, x. All right, so that's our constructor done. Oh, we've managed to handle our array and everything like that. So now we're going to go into methods, right? So obviously the easiest one to start with is going to be calculate average. So I'm just going to start with that. Like av. Right. So this function returns the average of the array, right? Yeah, that's what we're doing here. Good practice to have at least one comment per function. Difficult functions get more than one, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to loop through the array, but we need a total holder, right? So random total as integer, right? How do I know it's an integer? An integer plus an integer will always give me an integer. So I can make total an integer. Right, I'm gonna set it to 0 immediately. The way in which you code your constructor is there another approach of doing it without me dot. Why do you ask that? I think this is the one that they definitely want from you. I think the best person to ask for that, because I'm not allowed to go out of scope, right? So I'm not allowed to teach you stuff that you haven't already learned in class. So what I want to do is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's ask that question in the Discord channel for IFM1 and let your lecturers respond to that. Because if I give you like a weird method that doesn't, like that hasn't been taught to you guys, it's kind of my fault if you guys get stuff wrong, and they don't like that. So I'll lose my job, and I don't want to lose my job. So just kind of stick to what they teach you. Yeah, for now, or ask the lecturers what you're allowed to do. All right, so now we have total. We can also just loop through the whole array, because all we're doing is we're calculating an average. So for yes, just a cool thing for you guys that I don't know if you guys knew, right? Redim actually sets the dimension of the array so that the index can be the highest value of the index, right? That's something to keep in mind, right? I always thought it makes that many spaces in the array, but essentially it sets this, so it makes the array a size such that the highest index is this value. This is something to keep in mind when you're doing your for loops, right? Okay, loop through arrays, total equals, plus equals operator means total is equal to total plus some value, right? And the value we're choosing to use is sightings x, right? So the sightings at x. Now you'll understand that the reason I did this is that when I'm marking your code, I don't have to guess that this is going to work. I know immediately that whenever somebody makes an object and you just call an average, even if there's nothing in here, this will still give me a valid value, right? It'll still give me something that's kind of that works essentially, right? Obviously, we just return total divided by months. Okay, that's our calc average done. Then the next one that we're dealing with is going to be the lowest sighting, right? So this lowest sighting is meant to do the minimum, as I mentioned before. Lowest sighting as integer, right? And the lowest sighting is obviously just add your comments. Right. Array. Obviously, you want to be a bit more descriptive when you're doing it. Okay, so a couple things we need is, because of the way the lowest sightings is requested, we need to store both the actual lowest number as well as the actual index of the lowest number, right? So let's do that quickly. Right, and then we're gonna set these, right? So we start at 1 as usual. Okay, so now we start at 1. We're gonna set lowest index to 1. Set lowest number equal to sightings 1. We're gonna loop through it, right? So we're gonna go for x as integer, 2 months, right? Next x. In here we're gonna have an if statement as usual. If statement is going to check that lowest number must be greater than the sightings at X, right? If it is, then we're going to set the lowest number to sightings at X, and we're going to set the index to X. Alright, that'll get us our minimum. Now at the end of this function, we'll have lowest number being the minimum, and we'll have the lowest index being the index of the minimum. Now remember that least month has to hold the lowest index, and we are returning the lowest number. So remember to always do your assignment before returning. Once you return, there's nothing that'll hit after that. Alright, so least month equals to lowest index, while we return lowest number. Alright, so always save. You want to test and run, but I've kind of already done this practical and tested it, and I've marked a couple of people doing it, so I know this is going to work. But you should probably not be that confident, especially in a test, because you can make really silly mistakes. Alright, so next one is going to be calculate rarity rating. As I mentioned before, a case statement is good for multiple different options or cases. Funny, right? Cases, get it? But anyway, and an if statement kind of switches between two things. So if this is true or if it's not true, right? With the else statement. So that's kind of how you can model your thing. So you remember that they wanted 3 single if statements where you kind of go if else, and then they've got a select case. But one of the things you have to remember is if you don't return some value on all parts, you're going to get a nasty little green line, which makes your code look really, really ugly. So I'm going to show you how to get rid of that also. Okay. Overrideable function calculates rarity rating. And I had it as char, but somebody made a really valid point that it can be string. I'm gonna go with string because design doesn't always mean the end of the world, right? So this calculates rarity rating. Okay, and the limitations on us is 1 select and 3 ifs, right? So at first, let's create something that we can return. Okay, so dim answer as string. And in case things go wrong, you can set it to Z. Right? So if you return if you get Z back, you know that something went hopelessly wrong, and but the function will still work, right? So even if you send some random stuff that makes no sense here, the function will not break. Okay? So at the end of the function, we're going to return the answer. And immediately this kills that green line, right? So we can do whatever we want in between here and it'll be fine. So what we're going to do in between here is we're going to do a case. So we'll go select case and select on the rarity level, right? And we'll look at it. It does it for us. How nice is Visual Studio actually? It's amazing. It doesn't happen in Java, unfortunately. Right, so now we can do our first if statement, right? So the average that they wanted is less than or equal to 15, then the answer has to be C, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say answer is C, and we're going to say else. If the answer is obviously not less than or equal to 15. Obviously, it's greater than, right? So we don't have to write that as an if statement. So we can just say answer equals to D. Okay. Now, cool thing is we can copy paste this because we're lazy people. That's what we are. Ideally, you shouldn't copy paste, but if you want to save time like me, you can. It's not good, but I guess you could do it, right? So then we got B, we got C. Make sure you practice past papers so you know what you're copy pasting. If you just copy paste random stuff, it's going to make no sense to you and it's going to make no sense to the marker, and you'll spend more time debugging, and your marker will spend less time trying to find your marks because it makes no sense. Alright, so in case 3, we're going to have case 4 to 5, right? Important note on this 1 to 2 is inclusive of both 2 and 1. So if it is 1 or it is 2, right? So that's just a cool thing. Why do you use 1 or 2? Because this is a range. This is a range. I consider this a range. You can use or. You can use or here. But I prefer considering it as a range. So maybe it's 1.5. You never know. Like calcav could be a double. Right? Well, this is not looking at calcav. It's looking at an integer, which is rarity level. But in the event that you're looking for between brackets, right? You could definitely use 2 and it's not going to cause a problem. All right, now, okay, cool. As long as that helps you out a bit. So now we've got 1, 2, 3 if statements and 1 select case, and we've covered all of our stuff, and we've got an answer, and there's no green line. I'm happy. Are you guys happy? You can actually like click on your name at the bottom of your screen and tell me you're happy. Interesting thing with Blackboard, but yeah. And we got the overridable function called display. Now, display is one of the meaner functions in my opinion, because like why? So much formatting. Anyway, let's do it. So public overridable function display, right? A string. As usual, this you do our mandatory comments. Right, just copying from the question paper itself, the actual thing that we needed for this display function, so that it's on here. We know what we're doing. Right, so we got track ID, rating. All right, so let's create our display string. We'll start it at, in case 4 to 5, we repeated the same answers as case 3. Oh yes, that's a bit of a problem. My bad. It's supposed to be A and B, right? That was this one. That was a good spot there. That was a good spot. You're actually paying attention. That's how you pass. Right, cool. So now we got the displayer, and now we have to format the string, right? What a pain, right, guys? But sorry, random Discord message. Always so alarming. Okay, so I'm gonna use something called and equals, right? So the and equals operator. This is concatenate. But what it does is it's the same as plus equals, but for concatenation. Okay, what's concatenation? Combining two strings with the start of the second one at straight after the end of the last one, and that's what concatenation is in a practical sense. Right, so it's going to be track ID, right, and then it's going to have a colon, in the rarity level. Rarity level. And this one has a slash display and equals of the rarity level. Now they want us to format to 2 decimal place, the average. So we're just going to do that because we know how, and we're smart people. We studied hard for our tests. You guys are probably not going to study, and I'm going to be so sad. But if it's like I said at the beginning, right? Please, this is like the most ComSci 1 and Infos 1. This stuff stays with you for the rest of your life as a programmer, right? So unless you plan on literally giving up on programming as a career, you're probably gonna need it, right? So that's just a cool piece of information for you to kind of slightly depress you about how difficult your life's gonna get, but how much fun too. Who can say that they studied, that they built a whole system in their third year? How many, right? So calculate for rarity. Okay, oh yeah, but this is actually, that's a string, so it should be fine. Why is it not giving me a thing? Rarity. Did I spell calculate wrong? Tackle. That's why. Okay, here we go. Now we gotta display a string. Right, that's the display string. Right now, obviously the property method, I forgot to add a little green line for property methods. I'm just gonna hijack utility methods. The only one with a property method is actually sightings, right? So public property sighting. I think I was talking about byval versus byref, right? So byval is making a copy and byref is referencing the actual value that's being sent to it, right? So I'm sure you guys remember that from Infos 1, but in case Infos 1A, but in case you don't, there you go. Now have it. Right, that automatically does the get and set for you. We can put our mandatory comment here. Allows for the getting, setting, sightings. Right, so now that we have that, we can say, well, look, in reality, you kind of want to validate any external value that comes in, right? So optionally validate external stuff, right? That tells us that we have to validate the stuff that comes in on the constructor. So we have to make at least one utility function to validate, right? So we'll get to that. But that's just so you know that this property method is a way to handle external input, and as a result, we should ideally be actually validating anything that comes in from here. Okay, so, and obviously set value, this should also be validated. but we don't do that because we're running out of time. Well, not really, but it would waste too much of our time to validate everything. How is it that we are instructed to display on the display function? Is that how we were instructed to display on the display function? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but essentially this is what they wanted, right? They wanted a tracker ID with a semicolon and a rarity level, and a leverage, then a average sighting, then a least sightings, then a rarity rating. Oh, there's some spaces here, so we can just kind of go. Alright, so what's gonna happen is, because this is an empty string up here, the first thing that's gonna happen is we're gonna add the track ID like that, and we're gonna add a semicolon like that. Then we're gonna add a rarity level, and then we're gonna add a slash like that. Then we're gonna add an average sighting. There we go, formatted to 2 decimal place, and we're gonna add a slash again, just like that. Then we're going to add a lowest sighting that has been turned into a string. There we go, with a slash again, and finally we're gonna get the calculate rarity rate. Just like that. Makes sense, right? Remember, this is all being added in a line form. Yes, this will all go in as a line because this is adding what was in there to this. So this is gonna go tracker ID and thus plus that, plus that, plus that, plus that, right? Does that make sense? Yeah, there we go. No problem, dude. As long as it helps. That's my job. I get paid for it. And I try to be quite good at it. I'm hoping it works out. Alright, so that's our property method done. And now obviously we have our validator function that we need to add in, right? A utility function validating. I wanted to validate the rarity rating. So for the constructor, so that we can actually just check that that's a real thing. Otherwise it messes with a whole bunch of stuff, right? So this is gonna be a private sub is valid, right? Oh yeah, this has to be a function, my bad. Alright, so then we're gonna go if x is greater than 0 and x is less than 6. Now why did I choose these specific values? Well, that's on the question paper, right? So it makes it so cool. So it tells us here, right? So rarity level is between 1 and 5. Right? So that's important. And if it is not greater than 0 and less than 6, it is not correct. So this is correct. Here we can just return x, and then else we're gonna go incorrect, return 1. Right, and then obviously in a validator function only makes sense if you use it. So we go all the way up to our constructor, hopefully, which is down here, and we're gonna validate this rarity level before it pops in, right? So we're gonna do, so actually we don't have to make a line. What we can do is we can go and that will validate it for us. Alright, so that's a cool way to use a validator. And I think that that is the whole of the wildlife class done. 25 minutes for that class. Jeez, what a pain, right? So off to Rhino we go. Remember your little block things that I completely forgot to copy paste. So we're gonna have attributes we have constructor and we have methods. And after we've got methods, we're going to have utility. Right? And the only thing in Rhino is a crash, right? Crash is an integer. So I'm gonna go private crash. Right, so that's the only thing that's in here, essentially. The constructor is essentially the same, so I'm gonna copy paste. Classes charge so much time. That's why it's so important that you have a design, right? This goes so quickly. It's actually going pretty quickly. You have 3 hours. The first hour should be spent on doing your classes, roundabouts, right? So now you'll notice I haven't yet inherited because I don't like red lines showing up while I'm coding. So oh look, somebody mentioned that these should have been protected, right? And he's actually very correct here. This can't be accessed outside of this, right? But do we need to access it here? No, because we can go my base here, right? And we can send in tracker ID. We can send in rarity level, and we can send in months. Actually, we don't send in months. We send in 2 because Rhino is only monitored for 2 months, and here we have num in crash, which is an integer. And why is this in red? Oh yeah, as. My bad. Like ID, too many arguments for public sub new. That doesn't make sense. Let's go check this out. What happened here? We got tracker, rarity, and months. Here we got tracker, rarity, and months. What happened? What happened? Oh, right. There's actually no my base because I haven't inherited. So watch this. And somehow that figures out what that is supposed to be doing, and it's great. Right, and then we can just say crash equals to num in crash. Okay, cool beans, constructor done. Alright, so the methods, we're gonna go public overrideable overrides, right? And that's the one. Now it's already called my base, which we don't want. It's gonna return, I think it's A, not sure. Oh yeah, it's just return A, right? Really simple. And this is actually pretty cool because all we're doing is we're adding the crash to it, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say, well, we're gonna change this. Say them display equals to, right? And that's gonna pull out all of the stuff from my base, and then we're gonna go displayer dot or displayer and equals that slash and plus concatenate we're concatenating it with the crash, right? So it's just going to be crash. And this has to be C string. Alright, that should be the last thing, so it shouldn't be followed by a slash. And we return that. Alright, so if you noticed, I don't have to actually refer to anything inside my other class. That's how cool this was, right? What I am missing again, once again, is property methods. One for the crash. Public property crash. And alright, so get is gonna turn crash, while this is gonna go crash. Again, this is an externally fed in value, so it should ideally be sanitized, or it should be like validated at minimum. But we don't have the time to do that, and we don't particularly care, to be honest. Alright, so I like copy pasting. You shouldn't. I do, but you probably shouldn't. So I'm gonna copy paste. Right. So crash is gonna turn into pride. Private is alpha. So it's that you're commenting everything. So should we do so in the semester? Yes. Yes, comment every single thing that you're doing. Right? So just like I said, it makes it easier for us to find marks for you. It makes it easier for us to find your code and give you marks, right? Ooh, oh, this is a boolean actually. Alright, let's just delete those two traces. Now the constructor, this is no longer num crash. Here it's months. And here it's months. And here we delete that. Template rating returns. It does consume a lot of time, but you should practice it and get used to it. Right? If you're running out of time, then stop commenting, right? But preferably try your best to comment. Our lions get a rarity rating of C. Right, so now the displayer, what happens is we have to add pride and alpha. Right, so it's going to be mybase.display plus some slash plus pride. Right? Is the on the question paper, is it months left underscores for the derived classes? It could be. It doesn't really matter because you know how to handle for that now. Yeah, it's just pride or is alpha, but you can set it as you wish, and you'll be able to handle for overshadowing because I showed you how to do that now. Right, so that doesn't really matter at this point. You get what I'm saying? Right, I'm gonna go right display and equals what's that? Is alpha, right? Let's see string Right, cool, and I think that's it. Another way to return, if you guys see that and it kind of looks weird, right? Another way to return is to go display display, right? So this is another way to return, and it'll actually work. So, whichever one is more comfortable for you guys to use, you may use, right? Any questions so far about like the the classes that I've done so far? Obviously, Crash is going to turn into Pride. And we've gotten rid of all of the little red flag things, right? Again, copy and paste because I feel like I'm smart enough to do that. You should have extreme confidence when you copy and paste in a semester test. Okay, so if you don't have extreme confidence, don't do it. Not worth the risk. Anybody tell me what's the difference between overloading and overriding? Please see calc average, I'm assuming. Yeah, I'll show it to you now. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna put in is alpha. Okay, so you wanted to see calculate rarity is here, and calculate average is in the wildlife function, right? So calculate average is up here. Here we go. Calc average is here. Oh, here we go. What's happening is you're looping through each element of the array, you're adding it to the total, then you're taking the total and you're dividing it by the number of points. Are you cool now? Can I go on? Okay, cool. So remember to save your work at regular intervals. Remember to save on the T drive, not just on the desktop, because if ESCOM strikes, you will lose all of your work, and that's not a fun experience, right? So does anybody have any questions regarding the classes? Because we're done with the classes now, except for when we're turning off polymorphism later on. Is there any questions regarding these so far? You got a couple minutes. You got 2 minutes. I'm just going to drink some water. Make sure you type out or raise your hand if you have any qualms or issues. Oh yeah, guys, you're not at the labs. I keep forgetting. I'm so used to telling people to save on the T drive. No labs means just save on your own computer. Save it to like a cloud, like your Google Drive or something, so that even if your electricity goes off, you can try and submit something from your phone. Right? So just set that up in the meantime. Mess around with that. All right. So is there any questions regarding this? No? Yes? Maybe? Oh yes. One of the things I wanted to tell you is this is a structure, so uses my base. Remember to add your mandatory single comment, right? So as per QP right as per QP. Look at the property method. Cool, that's done. Okay, so everybody says they're all good. That's great. I'm not gonna comment this one out because it's kind of the same thing. You just kind of have to put as the question paper wants there and as the question paper wants there. And you can kind of explain why use months here instead of foreigners using 2. And foreigners watched 2 months. Cool. Alright, now time for the actual displaying, right? So obviously we need a multi-line text box. Forgetting you can't search that. There, that. Make a nice big text box. And a button. I remember I said one for C, one for D, one for E, and one for F, right? Make it a bit bigger. C, D, E. F. Right, and I'm gonna just do you. I'm gonna call this TXT display, right? So using camel case, naming convention, it's always important to name your stuff, right? The more you name your stuff, the better for everybody involved. So FRM, what do you call it? Wild type. Right? Something that here we can actually the text live monitor. Right, then it shows up here. This is nice. This is going to be btn input, right? Because the first step on anything is input. Text, on the other hand, is going to say input values for question A, equal for question C. Input values for question C. Actually, let's make it a bit smarter. Let's make it look cool. Right, input values. And we're going to have display details. Call this question 3. Right, and then the name will be btn display. Display, I'm not display. Right, so it's not question 3, it's question CD. That's the one we're looking for. B. It's rarity via table. This is question E. Right, btn no poly. I should have made it a bit bigger. Should have done that. Alright, this last one is going to be btn run accounts. Right. Right, we got question C, question D, E, question F, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to say, right, attributes at the top, while methods are below those, right? We don't have a constructor in the form class. Well, you can, but you probably at this level you shouldn't, right? All right, in here, what do we need, right? So we need an array, then number months. So we're gonna them. Let's start with 9 months. Animals as integer animals as wild type. That's cool, but this has to be an array. Cool. Now we've got an array of our base class. First step is to input, right? So get the size of the array. We're gonna go animal equal to cint box. So please enter the number of animals. Right. We can set up some cool stuff to make it look nice. 5 looks like a good number. Nice. Alright, now next step is to rename the array. Sorry if I'm putting you guys to sleep. Please feel free to ask any questions or anything like I said. So can you explain why you're inputting the number of lions? So I'm inputting the number of animals in total, but I'm putting the number of months that a lion is monitored for. The reason being is because in Rhino, we know that all rhinos are monitored for 2 months. Right? So that's why I'm only checking how long lions are monitored for. Right? Does that make sense? Yep. Alright, now we've got the array. You'll be penalized if you're private under the attributes. Oh, here. Yes, actually that's correct. You're supposed to write private here. Good job spotting that one. Okay, now once we've redone the array, next step is to loop through it and assign values. Alright, so for x as integer 1 2 animals x. Right? Let's get the common stuff first. Alright, so here we'll need to dim a string for track ID, right? So we're going to track string track. Sign it at one time. So all of us are slightly tired here. Wait, this I'm just making to make my life easier. You're gonna have to do the same thing. I just prefer it. Makes lines a bit shorter. So please enter the tracker ID and right, and then we get, so we need the tracker ID, we need the rarity level. What is the 5 in the input boxes for? That 5 is an example of the input. So in your, when you run it, you'll see the 5 show up where the user must type. And then the user can type over it or just press OK. It makes it quicker for your marker. Ideally, when you have actual test data, you should plop your test data in there so it's quick and easy for your marker. All right, and here what we're adding is we're saying give the rarity level the rarity level, and right, once you got the track, we got the rarity level, we need number of months if it's a lion. If it's not a lion, we don't particularly care, right? So actually, let's not get the common stuff first. Let's get the choice first. While I'm doing this, do you guys want to see the choice being done with a select case or with if statements? Please let me know. I'll usually take the first comment. I really don't. It's not really much different. All right, so dim choice. If statements. All right, cool. Okay, cool. So if statements it is. All right, let's check if it's a valid choice first, right? So if choice is equal to 1 or choice equal to 2, right? Then we're going to say, okay, well, else exit, right? Because it's obviously a wrong choice. But if it's not a wrong choice, this is a correct choice, then what we can do is we can go, I can do an if to see if it should be a rhino or a thing, right? So if choice equals 1, else, right? So, and if choice equals 1, it is a lion. If not, it is a rhino. Right, does everybody understand how that structure worked quickly, how the if statement structuring worked there? Right, now that we know it's a lion, right? Okay, cool. Another thing that we need to do is we need to dim a animal style. So dim my animal has animal. Right, we're not gonna set it. We're not gonna instantiate it for now, because we still need to get like. So track and rarity are gonna be commons. We're gonna set them months here so that we can just use both. Months as integer. Okay, so for lion, months is gonna be equal to num lion months. For a rhino, months is gonna be equal to 2. Alright, so now we've got months, we've got the common stuff, and the less common thing that we'll need to now make is an actual lion. Control X. Once we got choice, we can get those. And I'm chopping and changing a little bit fast because I want to get it done in the next like 3 to 4 minutes. But essentially, what happens is I ask for the choice, I get the track ID, I get the rarity level. Then based on which animal it is, I set the number of months. And once I've got the number of months, I can now build either a lion animal, or I can build an actual lion, because I can go my lion as lion, my lion, new lion, and in here we can have track rarity and numbers. Right, and for we do the same thing for the rhino. But instead of num months here, what we're going to change this to is crash because we don't actually need to put in a number of months. It's equal to c int box of rhinos in the crash int. Right. Actually, we still need the num months here. My bad. Okay, now we've got that. Now, after we've done that little if statement, we can now just loop through it. So we're going to go for integer to months y, right? What's here? It's probably equal to 0 to months. All right, now we're going to loop through the actual number of months for this to get the actual animals number of sightings, right? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to upcast. I'm going to say, well, my animal Wait, we should have cast actually inside the if statement. My animal equals to my rhino. What's wrong with you? Cannot be converted to wildlife. Did I not inherit you? No, I did. I know what the problem is. My rhino. Oh yes. Wait, no, I don't have. I didn't make any. So we got num months, we got rarity, we got tracker. My animal is a wild. Ah, there. That's the problem. I was making a. For some reason, I was making an array of wildlife. Why would I do that? That's dumb. Alright, we're gonna go like that, and we're gonna go a lion. Now I got a lion and I got a rhino, and it's inside my animal. So then in here we can go my animal dot sightings y equals to cint how many of this box cint not cint, my bad. It's gonna be how many sightings in month. Y and int. Right? And that'll get the number of sightings for all of this. It'll put it into the animal. Now we're gonna put it into the array. Right. I'm gonna go animals X my animal, and that is now stored in the array, right? So let's just go through this quickly and see what we've actually done here. Right? We went through it and we said, well, firstly, we set up a little string for the end. It's for animal number with a question mark, right? We're looping through all of the animals. We're going to create a blank animal. We're going to get a choice. So we're going to choose whether it's a lion or a rhino. We're going to create the track, the rarity, and the number of months, right? Because that's what most of these constructors need. Well, that's what the lion constructor needs. But at the same time, we need a crash for rhino, right? So crash for rhino there. That's important. Then num months suits this because at the end, we loop one time, right? We loop one time instead of looping here and there, right? So it's easy to find and fix a mistake in that loop. So what we do first is we say, well, number of months is equal to number of lion months. While for this, number of months is equal to 2, right? And we're going to say, make an array of 1 second. Sorry. All right, I am back. Sorry about that. People are calling me to ask me about stuff. Oh, so all right. So where were we? We created we created an actual lion, right? With the actual values for track, with the rarity and the number of months, right? For the rhino, we created track, rarity, and the number in the crash, which we got up here. Once we've done that, then we upcasted it. We pushed it into an animal. Once we have the animal, because we know the number of months, we can go. Well, if it's a rhino, it's only going to go twice. If it's a lion, it's going to go 5, 10, or however many times. It's going to get the number of sightings for the number of months. Because here at the top we assigned number of months to lion months, and here we assigned number months equals to 2. So remember, only one of those two can happen, and in that case, here's how we get the sightings. So now we've got the sightings, we've got the track, we've got the rarity, we've got the crash. What's missing is for the lion we need alpha and the number in the pride, right? So that needs to be done before we upcast, just by the way. So we're going to dem pride as integer. Okay, and it's going to be equal to c int box. And please enter the number of lines in the pride and int. Right. Then the other thing that we needed is alpha as boolean to c bool input box. I'm sorry I'm taking your guys' lunch break. I should finish in the next like 10 minutes, then we can all go have some lunch and stuff and come back, right? In this input box here, we're gonna get is alpha. So is the alpha male. Just so people know what to put here, we're gonna say, because yes will cause a problem, right? So we want to make sure people know what to write. We're gonna write true, right? And then before we upcast, we also need to assign those values. So we're gonna go lion dot pride equals the pride my lion alpha is alpha. Right, and that covers absolutely everything that we need for a lion. And so this is all of the details for the animals, all done, right? So 100%, if you guys code this out and you try it, you'll see that it works. I promise you it works, right? So I'm gonna test it a little bit later, right? So one of the things that we need to do is we need to loop through it and use polymorphism to display, right? So some animals, and what we're going to do is we're going to say, yeah, so first things first, clear the text box, because in case txt display dot clear, right? Once you clear the text box, you can loop through all of the animals and you can display. So we're going to go txt display dot text equals to animals animals y display, right? And okay, but that's only going to do one at a time. To make it do many, what you're going to do is you're going to go and here you're going to go and environments new line, right? And that will display everything from the array. Whew. All right, now that we've displayed everything, right? remember that this already has a polymorphic call, because in display, if you look at it, right, in display here, we've got a calculate rarity rating. This is polymorphically going to go to the one that's assigned to each instance of the class. So you'll get the A for the, I think it's A for lion, it's C for lion, or you're going to get the A for rhino, right? So you're going to get those two from that polymorphic call that's happening inside the actual base class. Interesting, right? Probably not to you yet, but it will be when you're using that to make such tiny code, right? This is so little bit code for the things you're doing there. All right, and I know this does seem like a long and tiresome process, but it's actually really, really helpful, right? So now we have something called button no body. Sorry about that, I just had to cough that out. I like your coding style. Thank you very much. I would put more comments, but I'm kind of rushing a little bit now. So no poly, right? So this is where I said we were going to talk about the me versus my class. Okay, do you remember that paint picture I had where I said me refers to the instance, right? Well, my class refers to wildlife itself. It refers to the actual implementation in wildlife. So if I talk about my class, if I say so if I say my class inside of wildlife, and I try and call my class.calculate rating, right? It will actually return this function instead of the polymorphic one inside the derived classes. Okay, so to do that, that's actually, to do this question, it's actually super simple, right? All you go is you go, well, extra, right? And you're gonna go public function question display, right, as string. Here, you're gonna copy and paste your stuff off of the displayer, right? But instead of calling calculate rarity rating here, just like that, you're gonna say my class dot calculate rating, and that's how question E is done, right? And so in here, what we do is we go copy this, paste it here, and instead of saying display, we're gonna say question. What did I call it? E display, and that's done. So question E is done. 4 marks, done in like 30 seconds, right? Super simple now that you know it. Very difficult when you don't know it. And now we've got a rhino count, right? So rhino count is a little bit more dangerous because this has something to do with direct casting or try casting if you don't know how to do a direct cast. But the idea is you don't have to do a try cast if you test what the type is before you cast. Okay, so just remember that. That's a key hint for this thing here, right? So again, we're gonna just do that because I'm in a bit of a rush. So I would ideally be explaining this more to you, but because I'm in a bit of a rush, the first thing I'm gonna do is gonna go. I'm gonna make an array of rhinos. So I'm gonna go. Actually, let's make it even shorter. Let's not make an array of rhinos. Let's just make a them my rhino as rhino, right? And then we're gonna say, well, check type, right? So if type of animal y is rhino, then you know what? This is a rhino. So we're going to cast it down. I'm going to say my rhino is equal to direct cast animals y. And now we've got the actual rhino. What we forgot to do is we've got to make a count. rhino count as integer, total rhinos as integer. Okay, so now we've got a direct cost, right? What's the problem with this? Oh yeah, the two arguments. So this needs to be a rhino, because that's what the costing do. Alright, cool. So now it's a rhino, we get it out, we increase the count. So it's gonna be counts plus equals 1. Remember to set rhino count equal to 0 if you do this. Just good practice. Right. And now we've got a rhino. We've got the rhino count up. What we're going to do is we're going to say total rhino plus equal my rhino dots crash. Right, and that sums up the crash rhinos. So we've got total rhinos and we've got the rhino count. So rhino count is the number of rhinos in our array, while total rhinos is the number of that's the sum of all of the crashes in our rhino base or database. Well, it's not really a database, but you get what I'm saying, right? Because it was declared outside the loop, we can easily just display it, and because we cleared the text, we can just kind of go txt display text equals plus equals the number of rhinos we are monitoring in the system. So, and please explain direct cost. I don't understand what's going on. Sure, let me just finish this and I'll get to that now. Alright? Okay, so the monitoring of the system and the number we're monitoring is rhino count, right? So C string rhino count. Okay, and then obviously we need environment dot new line. Right, and we're back here. Copy that, paste it. Where did I get a red line? Double to string. Oh, and also, no. That's why I don't like long lines. Your errors can be at the end here and you'll just cry for the rest of your life. In total, in all crashes is total errors. So yeah, that is question F done. All right, so let's explain what's going on in direct cost, right? So when I say type off, right, I'm telling Visual Basic to, okay, let's open up Paint and quickly do this. Paint, right? Okay, so let's first declare rhino, right? So we're gonna go my rhino as new rhino, right? So just imagine that's a real code sentence, right? And we do some blah, 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 right? That's a real thing, right? So this, what this does is it creates a rhino pointer, right? And then it says, well, we're gonna point it to a rhino, right? That's what this does. It makes a rhino in memory, right? But then what you do when you make in the next line, when you upcast it, right? You're gonna have something going. You're gonna have my animal as wildlife, right? But it's going to equal to my rhino. And somehow this will work, right? And what that's doing is it's saying, well, take this pointer here. Well, make a animal pointer. So an animal pointer is going to be that one. That star there, right? It's going to say, well, take that and make it point to the same rhino. But then, okay, that's tiny. Right. And then remove this link here. All right. So what happened here is you've got a star, but remember this is still a rhino, right? So this is still a rhino, okay? But it's just the way we access it now is slightly different, okay? So what do we want to do when we direct cast, right? So when you say type off, what it does is it goes from the pointer, it goes to the address, it knocks on the door, and it says, "Hey, what type are you?" And the actual memory will say, "Well, I'm a rhino," right? Because it knows it's a rhino. And then the memory will come back and say, "Well, this is a rhino." If you know it's a rhino, then what you can do is you can say, "Well, I'm gonna make another star, and I'm gonna actually cast it to that." Right? And how is that done? That's gonna go, well, we're gonna use direct cast for that. So we're gonna say my rhino equals direct cast my animal, right? Right? So that's when we make another rhino star again, because remember, we make the rhino star, the rhino pointer, and we say, well, let's just access it as if it's a rhino. But this works because it is actually a rhino, right? And that's why we ask type off to go to the door, knock on there, and say, "Are you a rhino?" Right? And that's how direct cast works. So direct cast literally just changes the way we access it. From rhino goes upcasting into an animal and then back down into a rhino. Does that kind of answer your question a little bit? Hopefully I didn't lose you. Okay, cool. So I'm glad that worked out. I think I covered everything I was supposed to. Let's just look at the storm here quickly. We know why we use our option statements. We know why we should rename things because renaming things is good practice because obviously you're going to be working as a team as a software engineer, and you want to make sure your names don't conflict with other people's, right? So that's a cool thing. The reason why, yeah, we've got essentially everything, I think. Yeah, I think that's everything. Yeah. Okay, just another key tip, right? Overridable functions or functions that are must override are called virtual functions. And in terms of me versus my class, me honors a virtual override, while my class doesn't honor a virtual override. So what that means is if there's a child class that has overridden one of the base class's functions, when you say me me dot that function, right, it will actually go to the overridden version. But my class will not go to that's why it turns off polymorphism, because it doesn't consider the overridden version. All right, cool. Overridden, overridden, whatever. I think it's time for lunch. I am hungry. So, and I've probably got a call to go to. So, yes. I'm actually chairperson of the UJ Anime Society, in case you didn't know. So essentially, yeah, so I know all of the local anime fans. But yeah. So that's that. Enjoy your little lunch break. I'll see you guys at 1. And then we should go from there. If you have any questions, like think about what I've done now, think about what I've told you guys. look at the question paper, see if I've answered all of your questions, and tell me what you want me to do, right? Please go out and I'm not going to test this here. Go out, code it at home from the video, and then test it yourself. Like you can, on YouTube, you'll be able to pause it and you'll be able to code what I've written. You'll be able to write it in your own code, right? Try and write it in your own code, make your own examples, right? And then 100% like try and explain it to yourself. So where I've missed comments, explain what's going on. Explain the stuff I've said. And then test it out. All right, enjoy lunch.